There was a question asked last time. We couldn't get to it, and I think it's a good question to go into because it's relevant for all of us. The question was, we are in a world of fast moving activities and goaded by various thoughts, good or bad. How can we insulate ourselves against these divisive thoughts and turn our attention inward? It is not enough that only during satsang we discipline ourselves. I find it so difficult. So, this is a very common question, and it's good to go into this because, as the questioner says, it's relatively easy to remain inwardly focused in satsang when we are gathering together like this. We are all collectively in the same space, and we therefore have no distracting thoughts or very minimally, and we can go within. But when we are in the world, so to speak, then there are various influences of different kinds of people, different types of events. So, how do we not remain affected by the divisive energy of all of this and have our attention inward? So, this is the question. So, the important thing for us to recognize is that what we speak of as turning within is really only to be attentive of our own reactions. So when we say turn within, when we say attention is inward, it is not inward in the sense of rejecting the outside world or somehow completely shutting out the outside world and focus on something within. So, that type of meditation, which is exclusive, always has a conflict there, because if, let's say, even when we are sitting in satsang and when we are sitting in meditation and we pick an object to focus our attention on inwardly, whatever it might be, then we are tuning out other things and we are simply focusing on one thing, and it has its value to have that kind of dharana, as it is said. But dharana is different from dhyana. Dharana is to hold an object. The word dharti also comes from the same root, which is to hold something. If we hold something in our attention inwardly, that is dharana. That is is practiced by many and it has its merits. But dhyana or meditation is not holding to anything but being fully openly aware. So there is a fundamental difference between the two, and if we explore that, perhaps then this question of inward and outward will be also resolved. Because even when we sit in meditation in satsang, what are we doing is the main question. We are not focusing on any particular object of attention, whether it be the breath or whether it be a particular sound or anything like that. But the real open meditation, which is also called as self inquiry, self abidance, self surrender. All of these are different expressions. In Sanskrit, it's called Atma Vichara, self inquiry, self abidance, Atma Nishtha, self surrender, Atma Samarpan. All of these are essentially pointing to only one thing, which is that we are fully aware of all that is rising and surrender everything as it rises. So that is what is meant by turning attention within here, not to any particular object, but to all that rises within us. So we may have various types of thoughts coming up. So even when we sit in meditation, that's why meditation then will never be a struggle, because we are not taking the position that I have to now meditate, I have to now focus, and I have to concentrate on a particular object. So that is different. And that can result in conflict, as we already said. But if we take this approach of open awareness, not taking ownership of any thought as mine, but simply remain aware of whatever rises. So, whatever rises, rises on its own. So, that's the first thing for us to observe, is that everything rises on its own. First of all, the body itself is happening on its own. So, this was pointed to in Bhagavatam too, where we see that the body is a product of so many aspects of the universe, the parents, the entire lineage of ancestors, the five elements, the various people who make the food that we consume. So, all of this make the body. So, the first thing to recognize is that the body is not mine and there is no I in the body. As Ramana Maharishi said many times, the body never comes and says, I. It is we, through ignorance, say that the body is I, or I am the body, or the body is mine. So the first important pointer is to recognize that the body is not mine, it's not I, it is a product of Prakriti, nature, that's functioning perfectly. It has tremendous intelligence with which it functions. Every cell, every organ, every system is functioning beautifully even right now. It's taking care of itself. We don't have to do anything for it. It simply takes care of itself very beautifully. And then the mind also similarly is a product of Prakriti again. Mind is nothing but all the subtle influences, just as body is all the gross influences of food and water and all the things that have been collected. Mind is the subtle influences collected over time, both genetically and environmentally. So it has come, there is a brain that has come through genetics, and it has collected so many influences over time. All of this has happened as ordained. So the mind that we have right now is simply an expression of Prakriti that is unique in each brain, which is all tapping into the one universal mind. So it is like the brain is an antenna, each brain is an antenna that is tapping into the one universal cloud, which is the global mind or the cosmic mind. So each one has a unique antenna, and of course, we pick certain frequencies. And when two antennas are fairly similar, we see there is a lot of alignment in the frequencies that are picked. But regardless, the cosmic mind is the source of all thoughts, all feelings, everything, and everyone is picking from the same. That is why we see the same kinds of thoughts no matter which culture people live in. We can travel to any corner of the earth People have the same insecurities, same fears, same desires, same attachments, and also the same sense of compassion, love. Everything is there as potential in everyone because it's available to everyone. So, therefore, the mind is also not ours. It is simply an expression of Prakriti which happens as ordained through whatever the antenna of the brain picks. So, when we recognize this clearly, this is all part of self inquiry. Self inquiry, therefore, is not some simple mechanical repetition of any question or trying to reach a goal of some kind, trying to attain liberation. None of that. Because the moment we have any goal, any target, then we are not in self inquiry. We are doing something else. Self inquiry is simply to observe the self. It is swadhyaya in a real sense, reading or studying our own self, what is rising. And in the studying, we get freed of it because we ignorantly think the body is I. And when we look within, we recognize the body is not I, it is simply Prakriti. We think the mind is I, and we look within, again, the mind is not I, it is Prakriti. It is nature. Then, when we sit in meditation now, with this clarity, then whatever rises is simply no different from watching a sunset, watching a flower bloom, watching a beautiful wet grass in the morning, or watching a unpleasant event in nature. There may be a beautiful breeze one day, there is a very violent tsunami another day, there is a pleasant rain one day, there is flooding the other day. All this happens in nature. We watch all that. And same way we can watch our own thoughts. Thoughts are simply rising. Different thoughts have different energy. Some thoughts are tamasic in nature, some are rajasic in nature, some are sattvic in nature. That is ignorant or passionate or very tranquil. But the important thing is neither of that is I. If there are some influences from the past that come forth as a ignorant tamasic thought, or some other influences causing a passionate thought, or some other causing a tranquil, peaceful thought, all of these are simply watched as watching a breeze or watching a violent tsunami, whatever it might be. But if we don't identify with it, they are just there. And that watching without identification is meditation, is self inquiry. And when we simply remain aware of all that rises, then the very ground of awareness from which all this is watched is recognized as unaffected by anything that rises. And that very awareness is the seat of the heart as I am. So normally, because we are getting identified with thoughts, we do not recognize this space of awareness within. So when we say again to turn attention within, it is to recognize this awareness, not to turn attention within where there is a subject-object duality again, where I take myself to be the subject and focus on an object within. Instead, it is to remain as awareness, that is to turn attention within. When we abide as awareness, our attention is within. And that awareness can be watching anything that rises inside or outside. So that is the essence of meditation. And when we are engaged in that, then First of all, no thought is then an enemy to be controlled or to be subdued, but simply to be watched and thereby abide as the ground of awareness where the thought is being watched. And when we simply remain as that space of awareness, then thoughts lose their hold because they sustain on attention. When we identify with the thought as the subject of the thought and act on the object of the thought, that energizes the thought. When we do not engage with the thought in that way but simply watch it, then the thought goes on its own, and what remains is just that awareness. And that awareness remains unchanged even if the next thought comes. And again, we simply watch the next thought. And when we have this discipline of being able to not identify with thoughts but watch thoughts as they rise, then the same discipline can be transferred to engaging in the world. If we instead focus on some object within, as said, and concentrate something, that requires effort and that requires exclusion, and that cannot be done when we are engaging in the world. So then there is a conflict between sitting in satsang and going outside. But if we do not do that, if we instead are very aware of what we are having as thoughts rising within and do not identify with it but simply be aware of it, then that awareness can be easily recognized even in interactions in the world. So when we are out and there is something that happens that doesn't go according to expectation, and let's say there is some frustration that rises, then that frustration can be immediately watched, that there is frustration, not that I am frustrated. Because the moment we say I am frustrated, I am angry, then we are already identified with it. But if we are alert, then there is just this recognition that there is frustration, there is anger rising. And when we are simply aware of all this, like reading a book, we are simply reading our own reactions, and in the process recognizing that it is not our reactions, but it is just reactions of the mind, which is prakriti, and we are falsely identified with it as our reactions. If we don't watch it, then it unconsciously pulls us into identifying as our reactions. But by watching it, the our is removed and all there is reaction. And the reaction also then loses its hold. And what remains is just the silence of awareness. And this also ties into the question of relationships. Relationships is where, therefore, we can actually see ourselves clearly. In fact, more than anything, it is relationships that help us recognize where we are. We can sometimes even delude ourselves into thinking that we are very peaceful or very calm or any of that. But when we are in a relationship of any kind, then whatever reactions rise in that relationship is a true mirror of where we actually are. And the closer the relationship, the clearer the mirror is. Because when we have a relationship of any kind, then we tend to build images around those relationships. The first thing we do is we build an image of the person we are related to, and we build an image of our own self as in relation with the other person, and sooner than later, it is the two images that are relating to each other, not the actual reality of the moment. So I see the other person through the prism of the image, and I act as the prism of the image that I have built for myself. And in this relationship has always conflicts. And all this is seen very clearly when we are aware. So that is why it's actually a great thing to test ourselves outside satsang. So when we are not in satsang, in reality we can always be in satsang, because satsang is actually not a physical place or time, but it is communion with truth. That's what the word means. So when we are actually in communion with the truth of our own being, then we are in satsang. So therefore, we can actually be very much in satsang in relationships, though we are not in physical satsang like this, where we are simply aware of every reaction that rises. And if we see very clearly that these are how I am relating to the other person, and I am building an image of the other person, and I am having expectations out of that image of the past, not seeing the person as he or she is right now, but just seeing through this image. And then the image that is built over time takes over, and therefore there is all the conflicts which are very clearly seen in so many interpersonal issues, interpersonal relationships. So relationship is a very wonderful testing ground for where we are. So any worldly interaction is a testing ground. Even simple things as being in traffic, having someone cut us off, or missing something that we were supposed to catch. There are so many little events that happen through the day, which are all reflections, and we just can watch the reaction rising within and not be identified with it, but simply be very alert and aware, watching whatever reaction rises. Then we are actually truly in meditation through the day. And it's especially so, as we said, in relations. Regular world events themselves, interacting with the man on the street or with the grocery store or with traffic, all of these are all events, times, people, places where the imaginary self always throws up reactions, judgments, agreements, disagreements, all of this. And all of this are ways in which we are unconsciously caught in the ego. Then if we come in the morning and sit in meditation and then do that for the remaining day, then it's not really seeming like we are making any progress. But if we through the day carry that current of awareness and watch all of this, and in that very watching we are aware, then we are free of these reactions. And most importantly, we can recognize that all of these are coming forth from the same ground. So it's not just simply watching it, but recognizing that everything is divine. So what we call as Prakriti, nature, is divine. So the ground of all activities is divine. It is spontaneously rising. It is the consciousness that is in our heart that illuminates all the events that we are perceiving, all the relations we are having. And the same is true with anyone, anywhere we are relating to, perceiving. So ultimately, we can also see clearly then through this inquiry that it is the supreme divine energy, what we call God, who is the ground of all of existence, and who comes forth as all the names and forms, including this body and mind, and all the body and mind that are in our field of perception, and comes forth as all the various reactions, whether it's tamasic, rajasic, or sattvic, which is all part of the play of the divine. So then we can see the person acting in ignorantly, apparently, or very much with great passion, apparently, or with great goodness, apparently, all of it as different phases of the divine. And when we see it in this way with anyone, and especially with all our close relations too, because it's very difficult, in fact, with closer relations to not take them for granted based on the past images we have. So, to not do that, but to see them as divine every moment, and thereby have unconditional love for them as they are, through that seeing clearly, not as a ideal that I have to unconditionally love them, but through the clear perception that everyone is a perfect expression of the divine in whatever way the divine expresses itself. So without any expectation that this ought to be the way they should function, they should behave, but just accepting the way they are as the perfect expression of the divine, and thereby unconditionally in love, naturally, and similarly in unconditional acceptance and love of whatever one's own body mind is putting forth as well, without judging whatever is rising, but just unconditionally accepting it, but not reacting to it, and thereby be in this constant communion with the divine every moment, in every relationship. That is how we can live in satsang all through the day. So we'll stop here, and I also want to make a note which is very important, and in a way that's